Today, I wanted to talk about the Hall of Fame voting. MLB Hall of Fame voting is announced Tuesday at 6 p.m. And right now, with about 50% of the public ballots and about 50% of the other ballots are not known, Adrian Beltre, Joe Mauer, Todd Helton, and Billy Wagner all have above 75% on the public ballots. Gary Sheffield's at 74.2%. And a couple of things surprised me here. Number one, I did not expect Joe Mauer to trend this high, and quite frankly, didn't expect him to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, if you're familiar with Ryan Thibodeau and the Baseball Hall of Fame tracker, he's been doing this for a number of years. And the public ballots, or any writer or any voter who releases their ballot publicly in one shape or form, and some send it directly to him and don't want their name publicized, but he has that information. So out of the other 50%, they tend to skew slightly more conservative, and these numbers tend to come down a little bit. So Billy Wagner at 78.4 is going to be right on the borderline of that 75% needed to get in. Andrew Jones is at 71.1%. I thought Andrew Jones was a better overall player than Joe Mauer. Joe Mauer is going to go in first ballot, and I know that might not be a popular sentiment. I got to watch Andrew Jones play, and I thought his defense uh, and 400 home runs and coming up as a 19-year-old surpassed Joe Mauer, who I understand had a great 5-year run as a catcher with an MVP and two batting titles. So I'm not downplaying that. But he played the second half of his career essentially as a first baseman and a DH. So you have to take that into consideration as well. Now, if you're looking at who's going to fall off the ballot, you need 5% of the votes to stay on the ballot for another year. Right now, not receiving 5% of the votes are players like Torrey Hunter, Jose Bautista, Victor Martinez, Bartolo Colon. Now, these guys certainly may not be Hall of Famers, but I am shocked to see them falling off the ballot on their first attempt. While Joe Mauer will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I don't know that if you look at the numbers of a Victor Martinez, or if you compare the defense of a Torrey Hunter, that they should be 80% difference in voting. I think that's a huge disparity. But it doesn't really matter for the lower guys because they're not going to get in anyway. Now, do you think Gary Sheffield is a Hall of Famer? I'd love to know in the comments. Do you think that Billy Wagner, Todd Helton, Joe Mauer are Hall of Famers? Absolutely. Let me know if you think you do. I think Todd Helton is a Hall of Famer. You're talking about a career that, even though he was in Colorado, he hit on the road. He was a tremendous athlete. A lot of people don't know that he actually played quarterback at the University of Tennessee in front of Peyton Manning before he hurt his knee. And that's what took away some of his mobility and put him at first base. But Todd Helton was one of the best hitters of a generation, and you felt that for about a 10-year period. Now, Billy Wagner at 78% is interesting. Mariano Rivera kind of kicked down the door for relievers, and I feel like every dominant reliever with 400 plus saves is going to end up in the Hall of Fame. Ironically, I think saves is becoming an out of date statistic. And I think it's fair to say, if you look at middle relievers or high leverage relievers, the relievers that come in the tight spots in the seventh and the eighth, Josh Hader when he's not closing, Andrew Miller going back a couple years, those real high leverage guys, I think some of those guys are going to end up having dominant careers, not as closers, but dominant careers as high leverage middle relievers. How long will it be till one of those players end up in the Hall of Fame? I mean, is Josh Hader going to go to the Hall of Fame not on saves? I mean, that would be something, as dominant as he's been. Uh, Craig Kimbrell is more your classic ninth inning only, save only, never really used in a setup role, and hasn't been successful the couple times, and he doesn't want to do it. So you have to really look at the way the game is evolving, and I think that you're going to start seeing setup guys, high leverage guys get in. So my predictions for this year's Hall of Fame ballot, once again, it's getting announced tomorrow night at 6 p.m., Tuesday at 6 p.m. And I'm going to say Adrian Beltre. First of all, let's just acknowledge 98.9%, wherever he finishes, he's without a doubt. I mean, what a great player. Without a doubt, a first team, first ballot Hall of Famer. I think Joe Mauer, according to these numbers, is going to make it. Todd Helton's going to make it. And I'm going to say Billy Wagner just misses, and Gary Sheffield and Andrew Jones just miss as well. I might be wrong on Wagner, but I think some of the older voters are not going to vote for a closer. And I think he could fall back a little bit. So I'm going to guess Beltre, Mauer, and Helton as a three-man class. And, of course, Jim Leland from the Veterans Committee. And those are my predictions. On other hobby news this week, remember Stadium Club comes out, I believe, on Wednesday. So keep an eye out for that. Some of the best photography on cards throughout the year. And hopefully Adam Palmer's back tomorrow. He's a little bit under the weather, so you got my dulcet tones today. I appreciate it. I'm Danny, and I'll talk to you soon.
Now, I'm definitely not as passionate, I think, as some other collectors in the industry are about these types of things, at least for the first topic for today's show. So the 1/1 Bronny James Superfractor Auto was pulled out of Bowman Chrome Basketball already, which seems pretty quick. It seems strange when stuff like that happens. Like, the distribution method, or however they distribute these products, I don't know. I feel like maybe there was a couple, what was it? It was probably like a couple weeks ago. I talked about how Michael Rubin was on the Ringer podcast with Bill Simmons, and he was talking about how they hired an auditor to audit the business to make sure things are going smoothly within sports cards. I would be interested to know the percentages of when certain products are being distributed throughout kind of the whole space, like within companies, like how are these boxes being sent out? Because sometimes it seems like the best card in the whole entire product gets pulled right away, and then sometimes it seems like it gets pulled, like it takes forever, or it never gets pulled. And I don't know. I mean, if you're Topps, I think I know I've used the chicken or the egg situation a bunch of times. It's like, do you want the biggest card to be pulled out of the product, and then people will want to buy that product not because not because that card is gone, or do you want the number one card to be in a product so that way more people buy it? I don't know what the scale is there of which is which, but so the people who pulled it are backyard breaks, and this is that. I mean, that's the part I think that I'm a lot less passionate about, if I'm going to be honest, than other people, because there's two sides of this. There's, in my opinion at least, I just don't see it seems like it would be too obvious for something to be going on for them to pull all of these crazy cards, and for there actually to be something going on behind the scenes. It would just be that it just seems too obvious, but at the same time, maybe they're just like, yeah, we're gonna make it obvious. Like that's the other side of the coin. It's like we're gonna do this because at some point, I mean, I guess at some point, like when you look at it and say, well, like if they are knowing where these boxes are going, how lucky can these guys get? Is my thoughts on it. And again, I'm not super. I don't know. I think I am on the. I'm not 100% on either side of the coin if something is going on or something's not going on. I'm definitely closer to something might be going on a little bit sketchy, where they know these boxes are going to certain breakers who are going to give the cards better publicity when they get pulled. Again, I know the math has been done, and statistically, these types of things should be impossible. But I think you also look at it and say, well, statistically, if you look at the lottery, the person that's winning the $1 billion jackpot, those odds are probably pretty similar. So it's like, but then again, I understand that you look at it and say, well, that's if you're just doing one pull for the whole thing, like for the lottery, versus there's multiple pulls on pulls on pulls on pulls. So like I said, I think it seems too obvious for something to be going on, because it's like, if everybody is saying something, if everybody is saying that something's going on, there should be probably a smoking gun. It just seems impossible that nobody has come forward. Neither Panini nor Topps have come forward and said, there was this thing going on, this person's now fired. Now, they probably can't say something like that, but I feel like there's also just too much leakage within the information within sports cards. Like, there's too many people that have too many sources that there's no way that somebody wouldn't have leaked some sort of information for this Bronny James card. But like I said, so that 1/1 Bronny James card has been pulled. The other big news that came out, I think it was either yesterday or the day before, is that Ronald Acuna is going to be the cover athlete for this year's Topps Series 1. I talked about the design. I think it's a pretty good design. I'm looking at the packaging. I like the packaging design. Over the past couple years, we've seen like Julio Rodriguez be the number one athlete, so I think that means we're going to see more Ronald Acuna type advertising for Topps and Panini. For Topps and Fanatics, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I think Ronald Acuna really is like, although he is such a superstar, I feel like he's almost an underrated superstar when you look at how big like Ohtani is, or you look at how big some of the other stars in the league are. It feels like Ronald Acuna should be in that conversation for number one or number two, but I feel like he's always in the top five, but I feel like he should be number one or number two, realistically. Now, I think that could be because he got hurt the one year that he won the World Series. Unfortunately, I think that does kind of stink. That he does have a World Series ring, so that's good for him. But he did tear his ACL during that season, so he didn't play in the World Series. But like I said, I think I talked about this when he is his 1/1 Superfractor auto sold probably in November at some point. I think, who knows what would have happened. Baseball is such a crazy butterfly effect sport where it's like, if he had played, who knows what would have happened, where maybe he gets an at bat where somebody else had a clutch at bat, or maybe he gets on base and that doesn't lead to an at bat or something along those lines. So I think this means just that we're going to see more Acuna in the Topps marketing, which I definitely like, which, I mean, I guess that would maybe mean he'll be at some of the Topps events, because I think that's what Julio Rodriguez did. I know that Corbin Carroll was also one of the top rookies, so I guess it'll be interesting to see which rookie they decide is going to be like that top star that's going to be one of the rookies that they kind of highlight. I don't think we know necessarily. I think it probably is going to be somebody who is in the minors and gets called up right before, because then they're going to want to put him in Series 2, which is what they did with Corbin Carroll last year. But again, I think Topps also has this inside info on when rookies are getting called up. The Ellie De La Cruz card last year, the call-up card, the cutoff date was literally the day before he got called up. So I think that they have this info. I guess I almost wish they would put the info out, but at the same time, maybe that's not good for business, because then they can kind of decide and arbitrarily say, like, well, it's sometime in May or it's sometime in June, and they can kind of say, look, Ellie De La Cruz is going to make his debut. We want him in next year's product, which kind of stinks because, he played in more than half of the season. He's getting a rookie card this year. Baseball is a weird sport like that, but at the same time, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of that I'm not a huge fan of that happening in baseball. I get that there's lead time, but I just think if you play more than half of the season, you should be in that year's product as a rookie. Like, holding players out of a product for a year, I'm not a huge fan of, if I'm going to be completely honest. I wish that they would just make sure they're keeping the players in the product. Series 1 probably should be out pretty soon, and like I said, Acuna going to be the cover athlete, and then the other story that we covered on the podcast is going to be that Bronny James 1/1 that was pulled. Pretty big card, going to be very interesting, even though Bronny hasn't really played that much, and he had a viral clip over the weekend where he banged his head, he like jumped up and he hit his head on like the scoreboard or something. That was kind of interesting. We'll see. I don't know. I mean, I think Bronny's probably still coming back a little bit from that heart injury that he suffered over the summer, so maybe things go a little bit better for him. I hope so, because he's going to be one of the, main athletes in a lot of products, I think, as soon as he sort of starts making his way throughout college and plays a little bit better, and then he makes it to the pros. But again, we'll see what happens with Bronny James, if he can really start playing a little bit better and playing up to the expectations that I think a lot of people have for him. I talk about, I think I talk about on this podcast that I'm learning new stuff within the hobby every single day, and this actually might be a new website because I've never heard of it before. But who was it? It was Mario from the baseball card. It's not spelled baseball. It's like Beisbol. I don't know how to pronounce that word, if I'm going to be completely honest. Card blog on Twitter posted something, and it led to a link called breakercomp.com. Now, when I went to they have their social media links in the bottom of their page. None of them were linked up to any. It was linked up to some marketing company. So, like, I don't know who runs this, or like, because they don't have any. They don't have any social media connected. They have like a contact us. They have a home. They've got links. Status 200, copyright status 200. I don't know if that's, I guess, well, that is the company that's on all of their social media. When you go to, like, if you go to the Twitter or the Instagram, that's linked in their, the bottom of their page. So Breaker Comp is a card pricing comparison website that caters to collectors and enthusiasts of sports cards, providing them with a convenient platform to compare prices across various vendors and sellers. Now, what that translates to is, what I saw was that they compare pricing for breakers, basically. And that is definitely something that I think we have needed for a while. I think the same way that sports card pricing benefited from, and I guess benefited in a way that's like, people became more knowledgeable of pricing comps and when cards sell, and if they're really selling with like Card Ladder and the Sports Card Investor app. And I mean, there's tons of different ones that do this now, but those are just the two that are, I think probably the industry leaders. They really started collecting all this data and putting really important data into the world. This is what this website, I think, should do. Now, like I said, it seems very new. The website doesn't have all these like a bunch of crazy features, but like you can go and you can look at release date, you can click on products, and they have like a description for products, but then you can also go into different, you can go into like pick PYT, pick a team, random, sports, breaker, and pricing, and then you can enter a bunch of information, and then it from what I've seen and what I've used it gives you all of the data on breakers that they have in their system. I guess I'm not sure if they're pulling API data. Like, this is one of the things within sports cards I think is very interesting. The data in information and technology is so new that I'm not sure if they have to like update this every time there's an update in pricing. I can't imagine there is. I would imagine it's probably I have no idea who it's owned by, if I'm going to be completely honest, but it feels like it's probably owned by a company. Well, I don't know, actually, because I was going to say Fanatics, but then I was going to say, well, maybe it's PSA, and it's like, I don't really know who would benefit from this type of information. I mean, this is the type of app where, like with GemRate, that GemRate app, I could see them being purchased by some large company. I don't know who, because they have so many different pieces of data that are very important to the hobby, that this is very similar. Now, I would imagine they're probably like Whatnot and maybe Loop. Sorry, I'm still getting over a little bit of cold here. So I would imagine that these, like Whatnot and Loop, must have some sort of data API that they can pull and that it automatically updates, because this seems like it would be too much work if you had to manually update this. And again, in the post, they kind of they pointed out that like certain breakers charge significantly more for a certain break, and I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think, like I said, when cards became more transparent on like the large scope of pricing, that's when I think the market became a little bit healthier. And I think what ended up happening was you had people buying cards at the correct prices, if I'm going to be completely honest. Because here, like, there are breakers that are charging way more for certain breaks. And one thing I will also say is if you don't want to, this is one gripe I have within sports cards. If I'm going to be completely honest, within, I don't know, the community, within people on Twitter, and it is Twitter, so it's like I try and take everything with a grain of salt that I see on there, realistically, but people complain about the pricing of stuff and the pricing of things, and it's like, if the prices are too high, and I get the people running a business, but it's like, if you're a customer and you're complaining about prices being too high, then, don't buy the product, unfortunately. I think that is what we've come down to, and unfortunately, another thing that's happened is, like, the prices really don't affect the demand for a lot of cards, which, like I said, I've worked in marketing before, and saying that something is sold out or close to being sold out is a marketing tactic that companies use. So, like, if you're Panini or Topps or Fanatics, and you're putting on your site that this box is almost sold out, or it's sold out, or it's close to being sold out, that's more of a marketing tactic, I think, to potentially try and sell more of the boxes. But so in this example, like, one of the breakers is selling spots for like $3,000 or $4,000 higher than some of the other breakers. And this must be a high end. I'm trying to look to see if it says what. Oh, it's just Absolute Football. It must be. I'm not exactly sure what the actual data is from, but it's for Absolute Football 2023. So this year's Absolute Football. But like I said, if the prices are too high, then don't buy from the person. Like, that's just, I think, realistically what the advice that I don't know if I don't even really think it's necessarily advice. It's just like, if you think the prices are too high, then don't buy. Like, don't buy the thing. Don't buy the thing from the person. Like, this will. Do I think that because breakers? I think people that. Okay, here's my kind of my final thoughts on this. I think that potentially people that are buying into these couple $1,000 breaks, they potentially might not be doing as much research as somebody who's buying into like a couple $100, maybe $10, $15, $20. Like, and that's just, I think there's like a meme or something like that where it's like, the customer who's spending an X amount of, like, a ton of money really doesn't ask many questions. They're just going to rely on they're going to rely on the service to give them the right price, where the customer that's buying something for cheaper is going to have a bunch of questions, all of these things. I think that's a meme. I think that's maybe a thing within business. Now, this is obviously a little bit different. I mean, the numbers that we're seeing, the difference in pricing is pretty significant. But I don't know, like, if the prices are too high, then just don't buy from them. But at the same time, you may look at somebody who's going to spend, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 on whatever they're buying here, and they may just say, well, I've broken with this person X amount of times. I'll just keep doing it with them, even if it's a little bit higher, because maybe the service is good. Maybe, they like watching the breaks and are entertaining. I think that is also definitely a factor in some of the breaks. I think my version of entertaining, and maybe the version of entertaining that some breakers potentially do with, like, yelling and screaming and stuff, maybe is not necessarily, that's not exactly my cup of tea, if I'm going to be completely honest. But if they're pulling actual big cards, then sure, that's fine. But I just think when you get into the point of the breaks where every rookie is being, oh my God, or whatever, freaking out, whatever. But so that might also be a thing where it's like the person who, and it's also where it's like the money aspect of it too is kind of what I look at and say, well, if a person is spending that much amount of money on a break, maybe, these aren't their last $7,000. Like, to them, like, I'm just thinking of this from my own perspective. Like, if I'm at, like, a restaurant or something, it's not the same thing, but I think maybe you'll understand the point I'm trying to make here. If I'm at a restaurant and the difference in a tip, if I can add like $3 or $4 or $5 extra dollars, for me, that's not that big of a deal. For some people, it may be a big deal, but like, if I can add 3 or 4 or 5, maybe $10 extra dollars to a tip, that's going to make, that's going to be probably a decent sized tip for the server or the bartender or whoever. So, and that's on a small scale. I'm talking, like, obviously dollars is much different than thousands of dollars, but the people who are buying into these $7,000 breaks, maybe they look at it the same way and they say, well, if you're going somewhere and you're spending $7,000 on something, on a sports card break, maybe they, I don't know, have the extra $1,000, $2,000 to spend. I don't know. It's really, it's sort of arbitrary. And honestly, you know, I think that this website is going to bring prices closer, and we're really going to have probably see, which again, when prices get closer, that means that companies are really going to have to start getting a little bit smarter with the types of marketing that they're doing, because when prices get closer, that means you're really going to be picking, you're not going to be picking off of price. You're going to be picking off of which either, you know, which breaker has the best service, which breaker is most entertaining, which, you know, for a lot of different customers, that money is going to mean something different. So the extra money that you'd spend on the breaker that you always braked with, it's customer retention. And I think within sports cards, that is gotten more and more important, especially with the fact that Fanatics is now trying to kind of step in and maybe even take over some of these breaks and take a cut of some of these breaks. So the companies that are running these breaks really are going to have to figure out, like, with, you know, with this website, they're really going to have to figure out how they're going to differentiate themselves in the market, because as the prices get closer, you know, that's going to be a differentiating factor between what people want to buy and then what breaks they don't enter. So the big news from, I guess it would have been yesterday, is Fanatics announced that they basically came out with this program that's called the 10, the 10. And so there's 10 cards that if you pull one of the cards on Fanatics Live, they'll give you $10,000 in credit, and then you keep the card, and you keep the card. That should be obvious, but they're going to give you $10,000 apparently. And the list is kind of interesting. It's a combination of all the sports. It's a combination of football, basketball, baseball, baseball, basketball, and soccer. No hockey, unfortunately. I guess maybe the cards that would fall under these important cards, maybe it's already been pulled, potentially. I'm not really sure. But I don't know. This seems like the list is very interesting, so I'll just go down the list here. There is one name that I don't know how to pronounce, that when I get down to it, I'll tell you that I don't know how to pronounce it. So the 10, they're calling it the 10, is the Steph Curry Superfractor from 2009 Topps, would have been Topps Chrome, probably, I would imagine. The Brady First Bowman 12 of 50 inscription auto. The Anthony Richardson Black Finite auto, which I think that's from Prism, and that's probably because of the fact the other quarterbacks aren't in that product, or the autographs aren't in that product. That's probably why it's that one. The Anthony Volpe Rookie Patch 1 of 1, the Chet Holmgren Logo Man, the Kylian Mbappe Superfractor, the LeBron Bronny James Dual Auto, the Corbin Carroll Him Superfractor. I think that must be from, I'm looking at the product. It must be maybe Topps Finest, or I'm not actually sure. I'm not 100% sure what product that Corbin Carroll is coming out of. So this is the one. So Trevor Zegras, Trevor Zegras. Oh, so he's hockey. Wow. Okay. Well, see, I didn't know how to pronounce. Actually, so I take back what I said probably about a minute ago. He's hockey. So I guess his 1 of 1 shield. Apparently, that's on this list. I have not been following hockey as much as, you know, the prospecting at least. So he was drafted by the Ducks in 2019, 2020. So that, I don't know what year I guess that would be, but that's a hockey card. And then the black Luka 1 of 1 from Prism, from 2018 Prism. And so I don't know. This is a very interesting promotion. I don't know, like, I'm going to go to, I guess I'm not 100% sure. Like, is there, like, I'm looking on Fanatics Live. I'm trying to find more info about this. Like, I guess it'll be interesting to see, like, if there's a expiration date on any of these. Like, is this within the next year? Is this within, I mean, I don't know why. At this point, if you're putting 2018 products in here, or 2000, if you're putting 2009 products in here, I don't know why you'd put an expiration date, I suppose. I guess redemptions do have an expiration, so maybe there is some sort of expiration here. But like I said, it's a very wide combination of a lot of different products from a lot of different sports. I mean, all the major sports, like I said, because I obviously didn't understand. I didn't know that one player was a hockey player, unfortunately. But but also the interesting is they put out the Kylian Mbappe Superfractor. Oh, so that's not the 1-of-1. So maybe that has been, I think, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe that 1-of-1 Kylian Mbappe from Prism has been pulled. So that's why they're talking about the Superfractor from 2018 Topps Chrome Champions League. That's what that card is. But they're including Panini cards, and that's one of the things that I'm very interested in. The fact that they're not limiting this, and Upper Deck also, they're not limiting this to just Topps and Fanatics products. And they're also not limiting it to 1 or 2 years. They're limiting it to, like, I'm just looking at the years really quickly. I mean, it's really like it's a combination of like cards from this year and then cards from the past couple years. I mean, obviously the Lucas Superfractor, the Mbappe Superfractor, the Steph Curry Superfractor. The rest of the cards are kind of coming from this year. So this is a very interesting promotion for me. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what the goal is, like, because the thing is with Fanatics is they don't just, Fanatics has shown that from a business perspective, they don't just do stuff they have a goal at the end of whatever they're doing, but the goal usually ends up being them trying to do something else before the goal is, they do something else before what the goal ends up being. You know, what they did with Topps, like they got the MLB license and Topps couldn't go public, so then they bought Topps at a cheaper price. I don't necessarily think a specific card from any of these would bring the price of Panini down to a point where they're trying to buy the card, or where they're trying to buy the company for a cheaper price because, the Kylian, or I guess, Kylian Mbappe is not, the Chet Holmgren or the Anthony Richardson or the Luka have been pulled. Like I said, I don't know what the goal is here. Like, it really, I mean, obviously you want more people breaking on Fanatics, but the only thing I can really think of here is that Fanatics has been potentially buying a lot of old product, and that they're going to be giving it to breakers, or they're going to be selling it to breakers, like in like some sort of like secondary market type deal here. And that's why they're doing this. Like, some of them are obviously Topps products from this past year, so you're really not going to have an issue there with them trying to open that product. But like I said, the Steph Curry Superfractor, that's from 2009. So like maybe they've been buying a lot of, maybe they've been buying a lot of 2009 Topps Chrome or Topps. Like, I don't think this is something where they're going, I don't know. This is interesting to me. And I'll be interested to see what happens in the next couple days, in the next couple months, and when the first of these cards are pulled. Because I've talked about it on this show, like how social media has sort of revolutionized the game on with cards being pulled and them being publicized. No. I think whatever. I think you know what I'm talking about. Being shown on social media and being popular and getting a lot of views and stuff along those lines. So I'll be interested to see which of these cards ends up getting pulled first, and if I don't know. I mean, I wonder if at some point all 10 of these cards will be pulled. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, the Prism Luka is one of the more interesting cards on here, because I don't know like what their goal is. Like, I just don't know what the point of this is. Like, it's a cool promotion, but Fanatics doesn't just do things because it's cool. They do things for the most part because they're trying to make some sort of business move. So I guess we're going to see what happens when some of these cards start getting pulled. This past week was the release of Donruss Basketball, this year's Donruss Basketball. And then we have Prism, which is coming out on the 7th. And I know that I have harped on this release schedule in multiple different episodes, but I really think that whenever Topps takes over, they need to come out with some sort of strategy for this. And I really, I guess we've gotten to a point within sports cards where it's just like almost a money printer, I think. And Panini, I think that we've gotten to a point where Panini has said, we're just going to come out with a ton of products and we're not really going to have any strategy. We're not going to really do anything. I mean, especially at this point, obviously, I feel like it's kind of obvious at this point. But and they're also just going to come out with all these products because they know if they can get, if they can get, I don't know, let's just say, I'm making up some numbers here, 50% of the people that bought, if they increase the print run 70% or whatever, and they can get, actually, I don't know if these numbers are actually going to make sense. So I'm just trying to think of the numbers as on the fly as I'm doing the podcast here. So like, let's say they increase the print run 20%. If they can get 75, 60 to 65 to 75% of the people that bought cards last year to buy those same products this year, even if they increase the print run, they know that all they have to do is they don't have to sell 100% of the product. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make. They know that they don't have to sell 100% of the product to make money. I think, autographs probably cost a little bit more nowadays, which I think, if I'm going to be honest, I think that's a good thing, because I think this industry, honestly, has gone too long with not enough information being public knowledge. So I think Fanatics, like for example, I think that they've said in the past that they've tried to get players' agents more involved in some of these autograph things. And I think going forward, I think Topps is really going to have to dial in on all the products that they want to release if they want to grow the hobby the way that they say they do. Oh, also, I think a funny thing that I saw on Twitter that I don't know if I've seen it recently, but what was it? I forget exactly what product came out, but people were, the meme now obviously is, Fanatics saying they're going to 10x the hobby. And it's like, hey, they're not going to 10x the hobby in a year. Like, obviously they're not going to try, there's no possible way that they could 10x the hobby or whatever that even means. We don't even know what 10xing means for them. I don't know if it means 10xing their valuations as a company. Does it mean 10xing the amount of people within the hobby? Does it mean 10xing the amount of product that they're going to print? We don't really exactly know what that 10xing is going to mean. But like I said, people on Twitter, which I don't know, you know how frustrated I get with people on Twitter sometimes. The meme is, or people are saying, "Oh, is this how we're going to 10x the hobby? Has the hobby 10x yet, or whatever?" And it's like, Fanatics just took over, very recently, so like obviously it hasn't happened yet. Now, I haven't really seen that in quite some time, if I'm going to be completely honest. But it was something I saw like a month or two ago, and I was just like, I feel like I want to talk about it on the podcast, but at the same time, it's like, what's even the point sometimes? Because it's like such a negative way to view what Fanatics is even saying. But so when Fanatics takes over basketball, I really hope that they take a more strategic approach to when they're going to release products throughout the year, because I do think there is a hierarchy of products. And I think when Fanatics comes in and they start making basketball products, I almost hope that they come in and say, again, and I'm using the wrestling example because I think the wrestling example is the best comparison for this. The random pay-per-view in, there's SummerSlam, there's Royal Rumble, there's I don't think they do Great American Bash anymore, but like that's maybe a smaller one. But there are some pay-per-views, WrestleMania, obviously, there are some pay-per-views that are more important. And I think that's how I think that they should view sports card releases. Like, there are some, every month or every couple weeks there is a WWE pay-per-view, but every WWE pay-per-view is not WrestleMania. Every WWE pay-per-view is not the Royal Rumble, which I think is coming up this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure. But either way, I just hope that Fanatics can look at can look at the way that Panini really has just, I don't know. It just seems like to come out with Donruss and Prism both at the same time. It's like, not the same time, but varies, the January 24th, and then I think February 7th is when Prism comes out. It's like, these feel like products that should they should maybe have a little bit more spaced out, but it just feels like, it feels like you're putting the Royal Rumble and the WrestleMania right next to each other. Now, would you consider Donruss the Royal Rumble? Maybe not. Maybe it's more like SummerSlam. Maybe it's more like one of the medium to small pay-per-views in theory. And I know maybe some people that aren't wrestling fans, I'm maybe losing you on this comparison. But like with, whether it's UFC or boxing, it's like not every UFC fight is going to be, McGregor, or not every pay-per-view is going to be, Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao, Not everyone is going to be Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. Not every pay-per-view is going to be the biggest one. It's the same with sports card releases. But to put two releases that I think are very important so close to one another, I don't love that, and I really hope that when Fanatics comes in and they start making these products, they really look at the strategy of building up to some of these big releases, and they figure out when these big releases should come out based on the sports calendar, because I think it's going to be different, or based on, if they want to do, I think something that might be cool would be to, like, if February, or if... I think maybe February, because then they could do, could do around the All-Star game, you could do for basketball for Prism, and then the Super Bowl for football Prism. You could spread it out that way. I mean, maybe that is a little bit counterintuitive to what I was saying, but it's different sports, so maybe they do like the month of Prism or something like that, and it wouldn't be Prism, I guess it would be Topps Chrome when Fanatics takes over. But either way, I just think that, I hope that Fanatics takes a look at what Panini is doing, and they do not duplicate the strategy of how they are releasing products, because it feels like they're really just like, we don't really have any strategy at this point. We're just going to try and throw them all out there, because we know that, like I said, if we get 50% of the people that bought it last year, we're going to make money, and we don't really care when the product is coming out. Like, we don't care. We've already made the money up front, especially when they are selling to all the distributors and stuff like that, like, Targets, Walmarts, hobby shops. When they've already made that money, they don't really care maybe when these products are coming out, because the money's already in their bank account. So I hope that Fanatics takes a look at this, and they really decide what's going to be the right strategy for sports card releases.